It's the best program in the Pac-12 right now until somebody proves otherwise. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, talking Washington football with Chris Fetters. You can join him on Dogman 247. Chris, how you doing today?
Doing great, Mark. How are you?
Doing just fine. We all made it through National Signing Day. Of course, the big haul came in December, and then the loose ends were wrapped up for most programs this past Wednesday. We've got a number 2 ranked Pac-12 class, number 16 in the nation, according to 247 Sports. I see one player, kind of a wide receiver out there dangling as a hard commit, Puka Nacua. What's the story on him in particular?
So essentially, they haven't received Puka Nacua's letter of intent yet, and that's because he signed at 10:45, or he didn't sign, but he committed to Washington at about 11 o'clock or so last night, Mountain Time, in Salt Lake City. He did it on a TV show or sports show on KSL, one of the main Salt Lake TV stations. And so he committed to Washington over USC and Oregon, BYU, UCLA, Utah. He was actually a USC commit for a really, really long time, but obviously with a lot of the shakeup going on there and the coaches, the turmoil and just the general kind of unease with what was going on at SC caused him to rethink some things. And he took a bunch of visits, visited Washington, visited Oregon, visited Utah and UCLA. And so that was kind of his final 5. And the kind of the backstory on that last night is that he couldn't necessarily get to the TV station on time because of their snow situation there, which actually where I'm not in Seattle right now, but Seattle's got much the same issues. And so the snow was causing a little bit of havoc with the timing of the decision, but Puka was able to get in there, and his coach from Orem was there, and his brother Samson, who plays receiver at Utah, was there, and his mom was there, and they finally cajoled the mom to kind of get in front of the camera and do the whole hat dance in front of the table, and he picked Washington. So at this point, Puka has told 24/7 that he is going to go ahead and send in his letter of intent at some point today, Monday. But so far, Washington has not announced it. We expect that they're going to at some point, but this is a kid that really did his due diligence and actually waited, obviously, until Sunday to make his announcement, which he could have done it on Wednesday if he was fully sure about his decision, which he obviously wasn't. So a kid he was the offensive MVP of the Polynesian Bowl, had a monster game. I saw him live in Honolulu. He had just a great game, has great ball skills. He's about 6'2", 6'3", sneaky fast, but he was the most productive receiver in high school football last year. He caught over 2,300 yards worth of footballs, and he's just a guy that Washington was just crying out for. They needed a playmaker at receiver, and this is a guy that could potentially start as a freshman. I think one of the selling points was the new receivers coach, Junior Adams, and his plan for Puka going forward, and the possibility that they could, kind of get him integrated into what's going on this fall. Because last year they had 3 really, really good prospects, true freshman prospects, and Marcus Spiker and Austin Osborne, Trey Lowe, and all of them redshirted. Trey Lowe actually did play in the Rose Bowl, but he, under that new 4-game threshold, all of them redshirted. So to get Puka to come in and possibly play as a true freshman would be a really interesting twist, because we thought they had guys that could do that last year and they didn't use them.
And here, Chris, I always thought that the winter months in Seattle were locked into 40s and 50s and rain and nothing else. Didn't even consider it getting below
20s
that.
right now. It's 20s right now and snowing. So go figure.
Wow. All right. I am not envious even living in Connecticut right now, because we don't have any snow on the ground right now. All right. So Nacua is the best player in the state, according to 247 Sports. They're in Utah, 22nd ranked at his position at wide receiver. So it's a good class, no question. It's top 15, number 16 technically. Who do you like? What do you like? Where did the needs get filled?
Yeah, now the 16th ranking, Mark, that is the composite. So that includes like ESPN and Rivals and all the others. But if you take just 24/7 Sports and our group of national analysts, which include guys like Brandon Huffman and Greg Biggins and Blair Angulo out west, the guys who I consider the best in the business and have been doing it for a couple decades now, 24/7 Sports actually has Washington as the number 11 class, and they have them just right behind Oregon, but they also have them, if you look at just the ratings per recruit, Washington is 7th nationally. So I think the 24/7 guys think really, really highly of this class. They've got 15 or 16 four-star recruits. I don't remember the exact number, but it's right there, 15, 16, which is the biggest number they've ever had. They've got 10 guys that are in the top 247 in terms of the number of guys that are considered the top of the top. And actually, Puka Nacua is interesting. He was actually, when he committed last night, he became the highest rated recruit in terms of the pure 24/7 composite, or the pure 24/7 numbers. He's the number 48 guy nationally. And right behind him is Jacob Bandis at 57. You got Trent McDuffie at 61. Overall, you got 10 guys in that top 24/7 or top 247 players in the country. So overall, they addressed everything they needed to except for one position, which was tight end. I guess they just either didn't find the body that they were looking for, because they do really ask a lot of their tight ends in terms of both the pass game and in terms of being that extra blocker out on the end. So but other than that, they really addressed their needs comprehensively. A lot of like for like numbers. Obviously, you lose a Jake Browning, but you get a Dylan Morris at quarterback. You lose a Bishop, or you lose a Myles Gaskin at running back, but you pick up a Cameron Davis, who's really, really highly thought of out of Upland, California. USC really tried to make a late push for him. And then obviously you get Puka Nacua at receiver with another guy from Upland, Taj Davis. That makes a nice little receiving core. And then offensive and defensive lines were stacked. I think they ended up with about 8 guys between those two lines. A lot of depth and a lot of quality talent there. I don't think you should expect any of those guys to really be huge names right away. Defensively, maybe a Jacob Bandis, because he is pretty solid and is I wouldn't say he's a finished product, but at least as far as the high school game goes, he certainly looked to be a guy that could make an impact right away. And then obviously at linebacker, they brought a ton of numbers in, especially at middle linebacker. Daniel Heimuli, who they picked up on signing day in February, is a kid who was the defensive MVP of the Polynesian Bowl, sideline to sideline guy. He was one of 2 Bay Area middle linebackers that they were trying to go after. The other kid was Henry To'oto'o, who signed with Tennessee. And then in the defensive backfield, obviously they lost a number of guys. They lost their entire front, their starting 4, except for Miles Bryant, who's going to be the nickel guy returning as a senior. But they lose Taylor Rapp, they lose Byron Murphy, they lose JoJo McIntosh. So they lost Jordan Miller as well. But they recruited a ton of guys. And then again, one of the other February signees they got was a kid named Asa Turner, longtime UW commit, who kind of waffled in mid-December. He was going to sign, but then Notre Dame came on really strong, and he was kind of 50-50 torn between them. But he's a kid who shows a ton of range at safety. He had a pick in the Polynesian Bowl, and ultimately I think he just decided that his initial decision to choose Washington was the right one for him. So he went ahead and signed with the Huskies February 6th, I guess that was, that Wednesday. So overall, really, really strong class. I think they addressed every need in the book except for the one at tight end. Otherwise, a phenomenal class. A lot of fans think it's the best one they've ever signed.
12 players from California, 5 from Hawaii. That's out of 23 total. And that's 8 already on campus ready to go for spring practice. And I find it interesting.
They expect a couple others, like Nate Kalepo, I think, Sama Pa'ama. I think so there's a couple more that I think will be enrolled by the time spring practice rolls around, Mark.
I find it interesting that there's typically just a few spot difference in ranking between all the major services. But when you say number 16 composite and then claim 247's at number 7,
in terms of overall rating per recruit, not the total. Total.
Oh, number 11.
They're number 11. They're number 11 in terms of the overall 24/7
per player rating. Number 7, number 11. And that's still a 5-spot difference, meaning that the other services are in that 20 range.
One guy I think they did use, who I think was kind of a name guy because he played at the same school as Kayvon Thibodeau, was Washington middle linebacker Josh Calvert, who's already on campus, and he's going to be a good one. And he was a guy who played at Oaks Christian, played quarterback and linebacker, was going to go ahead and play linebacker mostly this year, but because of an emergency, he ended up playing a lot more quarterback than he needed to. And so he kind of took one for the team in that way. And I think his recruitment and his process kind of suffered a little bit because of that. I think if he had played solely linebacker, I think he would have gotten a ton more offers. And I think for that, Washington probably ended up getting a little bit of a break because I think he kind of fell maybe just a smidge under the radar. But you talk to guys like Huffman and Biggins, they're in love with a guy like Joshua Calvert. They just think he's a hard-nosed football player, a guy that's not going to shy away from contact, a smart kid, a leader, all the kind of intangibles you'd love to see in a guy that's going to be your middle linebacker.